My mommy owns this neighborhood. What are you going to do about it? That's what HOA President Delilah Morrison's spoiled daughter said after stealing my ATV in broad daylight, live streaming the whole theft while flipping me off. 19-year-old Skylar Morrison rolls up in her daddy's BMW, walks straight into my garage, and fires up my custom 1987 Honda 4Trax. The smell of burning rubber fills the air as she peels out, screaming, "Finders, keepers, loser!" Then posts it on Instagram, untouchable. I'm Tank Wheeler, retired Army mechanic. The Morrison family had been terrorizing this neighborhood for years, but Skylar stealing my ATV, that was the line she shouldn't have crossed. What she didn't know was that karma catches up to entitled brats who think they're above the law. What would you do if some entitled princess stole your ride and dared you to stop them? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Here's what you need to know about the Morrison crime family, and yes, I'm calling them criminals because that's exactly what they turned out to be. I'm Marcus Tank Wheeler, 47, retired Army mechanic. Spent 20 years fixing Humvees in places where the sand gets in everything and the coffee tastes like motor oil. After my wife Sarah lost her cancer battle, I settled in Willowbrook Estates with my son Devin. My garage became our sanctuary, the sharp smell of WD-40 mixing with Devin's after-school snacks, the rhythmic ping of his wrench against metal as we worked side by side. That purple ATV sitting in the corner. Sarah picked that exact shade during her final weeks. Like Arizona sunsets, she'd whispered, running her fingers over the color samples. The leather seat still holds the impression of our hands working together, restitching every seam. She never got that first ride, but watching us complete it brought her peace in those last days. Now meet your villain. Delilah Morrison, 52, HOA president and professional soul crusher. Picture a blonde piranha in a white Escalade, Ring doorbell cameras scanning like prison guard towers, lawn so artificially perfect it probably violated several environmental laws. This woman turned homeowner rules into medieval torture devices. Her husband Bradley sits on city council, making problems disappear faster than free beer at a construction site. Together, they'd built a corruption empire that would make Chicago politicians blush. The harassment campaign launched exactly 18 months ago with surgical precision. First strike, commercial vehicle violation citation taped to my work truck, in my own driveway, at 6 a.m. The audacity was breathtaking. "Mr. Wheeler," Delilah purred when I called, "business vehicles violate our community standards. It's a pickup truck, with tools visible through the rear window, very unsightly." Next came garage door aesthetic violation. Apparently a quarter-sized dent from Devin's basketball disrupted their visual harmony. Then noise ordinance infractions for using power tools after 7 p.m., despite bylaws clearly stating 8 p.m. cutoff. Each citation, $150 plus administrative processing fees that mysteriously doubled the cost. Being a good neighbor, I paid the first few. Biggest mistake of my life. Then elderly Mrs. Henderson knocked on my door, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. The smell of her famous oatmeal cookies couldn't mask her desperation. "They're taking my house, Tank. 40 years here, and they're taking it." $2,800 in accumulated fines for her late husband's workshop shed grandfathered for 15 years until Queen Delilah decided it compromised property values. The Martinez family down the street had already lost their home over holiday decoration violations. Their kids' Christmas lights were apparently garish and inappropriate for the community aesthetic. The pattern was surgical: target veterans, blue-collar families, anyone who didn't reek of country club membership. Meanwhile, Delilah's wealthy friends parked boats in driveways and built unpermitted additions without receiving a single citation. That's when my military intelligence training activated. Time to document everything. Enter their crown princess, Skylar Morrison, 19, professional disappointment and Instagram influencer wannabe. Community college dropout who treated real life like a video game where daddy's money bought unlimited respawn points. Her legal troubles, shoplifting, fake IDs, hit-and-run accidents, vanished like morning mist whenever mommy made phone calls. She'd been stalking my ATV for months, circling it like a predator. Just sitting there collecting dust, she'd hint during her garage visits. I could give it some real adventure. Every request politely declined. But Tuesday morning in March, politeness died a violent death. I'm elbow deep in carburetor cleaning when my 4-Trax engine roars to life. The sound hits like ice water. Nobody starts that engine but me. I sprint outside to find Princess Skylar backing out, cell phone recording her Grand Theft Auto for social media. "What the hell are you doing?" She actually laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Relax, boomer. Just borrowing it for content. Put it back." Now. That's when she delivered the line that triggered World War III. "My mommy owns this neighborhood, what are you gonna do about it?" What I did was watch her peel out, burning rubber filling the morning air with the acrid smell of disrespect, middle finger raised high while live streaming the whole theft. Most people would have called police immediately. But soldiers don't react, we plan. And I'd been planning for this exact moment longer than she knew. The first thing I did wasn't call the cops, it was screenshot every single social media post Skylar made with my stolen ATV. 20 years in the Army teaches you that documentation wins wars, not emotions. Her Instagram story showed her joy riding through Papago Park, my wife's purple paint gleaming in the desert sun while she posed like some kind of outlaw princess. The caption made my jaw clench. "When you're untouchable, #NewRide, #Daddy'sConnections." Her friends' comments were pure gold for my future case. "Whose is it?" "Don't worry about it, LOL." Every screenshot automatically saved to my cloud storage. Evidence, meet your new best friend. 20 minutes later, I called Phoenix PD. Officer Rodriguez arrived looking like he'd rather be getting a root canal without anesthesia. "So let me get this straight," Rodriguez said, scribbling notes that looked suspiciously like grocery lists. "The HOA president's daughter took your ATV?" "Stole. The word you're looking for is stole." He sighed like I'd asked him to solve quantum physics. "Well, technically it's theft, but it's complicated with neighborhood politics. The Morrison family has friends downtown, if you catch my drift. Maybe try working this out neighborly before pressing charges." There it was, my first taste of Morrison immunity in action. But Rodriguez's nervous fidgeting told me everything about their political reach. I thanked him politely while mentally adding corrupted local police to my growing intelligence file. 6 hours later, my ATV returned like a bad penny with interest. The sound of gravel crunching announced Skylar's triumphant return. I watched from my kitchen window, the smell of reheated coffee mixing with my rising blood pressure as she dumped my 4-Trax in the driveway like yesterday's garbage. A zip-tied note fluttered from the handlebars like a white flag of disrespect. "Thanks for the loan, XOXO-S." Walking outside felt like approaching a crime scene. The damage made my chest tighten. Mud caked on Sarah's custom paint job, 3 deep scratches gouged through the purple down to bare metal, and muddy boot prints decorating our hand-reupholstered seat like graffiti on a cathedral. But here's where my military training kicked in from an old logistics course I'd taken. Property damage over $1,000 transforms misdemeanor theft into felony territory in Arizona. I'd learned that tidbit during a legal briefing about stolen military equipment. 1 receipt, 1 damage estimate, and suddenly, Little Princess was playing in the big leagues. I spent the next hour documenting everything with high-definition photos, timestamps, detailed measurements. The repair estimate from my buddy's shop confirmed what I suspected. $1,200 minimum to restore Sarah's paint job. Felony threshold, officially crossed. While photographing evidence, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hope you learned your lesson. Some people own this neighborhood. Others just rent space in it." Screenshot, saved, added to the growing digital mountain of evidence. That evening I made a hardware store run that would change everything. The items in my cart looked innocent enough. GPS tracker, motion sensors, and trail cameras borrowed from Jake's hunting gear. But I'd remembered something from my Army days about equipment security. You can legally track anything you own, and the evidence holds up in court beautifully. Installing the GPS tracker in my hidden restoration compartment felt like planting a landmine. Skylar would never find it in 1,000 years. The trail cameras went up strategically, garage entrance and driveway approach covered in 4K resolution. If Princess Entitled wanted round 2, I'd have her performance recorded for posterity. The next morning brought Delilah's counterattack via certified mail, delivered with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Emergency HOA board meeting for my property. Violations listed. Unlawful surveillance equipment, my perfectly legal cameras, automotive fluid contamination, 2 microscopic oil drops, and my personal favorite, disturbing community peace through frivolous police reports. Total fines, $2,400, including late fees backdated 6 months like some kind of temporal punishment. But Delilah had made a crucial error. The meeting notice bore only her signature, not the required board majority. I'd learned that requirement during my late-night deep dive into Arizona Planned Community Act regulations, fueled by gas station coffee that tasted like liquid determination. By 2 a.m., surrounded by legal documents and the soft hum of my printer working overtime, I'd uncovered their Achilles heel. Arizona law requires 30-day cure periods before foreclosure, but these people had been fast-tracking liens like they were handing out parking tickets. Mrs. Henderson's house, the Martinez family, 3 other neighbors from county records, all potentially illegal foreclosures violating state statutes. As dawn painted the desert sky purple like Sarah's favorite color, the truth crystallized with perfect clarity. Delilah wasn't running an HOA. She was running a real estate theft operation disguised as community management. Skylar stealing my ATV wasn't just a crime, it was the thread that would unravel their entire criminal tapestry. Time to pull that thread until their whole world came apart. 3 days after my late-night legal research session, I filed my first strategic counterstrike, a formal complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate against Delilah Morrison. The sweet irony made my morning coffee taste like victory. She'd weaponized bureaucracy against neighbors for years. Now those same weapons were aimed at her throat. My complaint read like a prosecutor's wet dream. Abuse of HOA position for personal gain, selective enforcement targeting potential sellers, suspicious foreclosure patterns flowing directly to her company. 23 pages of evidence that could choke a horse, all backed by documentation that would make the IRS jealous. The department's response came faster than pizza delivery. Official investigation opened, Delilah's real estate license under review, and suddenly, Queen Bee was discovering what it felt like to have her wings clipped by her own medicine. But Princess Skylar was just hitting her criminal stride. Delilah's panic response materialized overnight like a rash. Emergency HOA board meeting to remove me entirely before I could inflict more damage. Her accusations showed creative flair, threatening board members, creating hostile environment, documented harassment of community officials. The vote was scheduled for next week, with her controlling 4 of 7 positions. Should have been checkmate. Except I'd learned something about coalition building during my Army days. Superior numbers and motivation beat political connections every time. Mrs. Henderson signed up immediately. Easy recruiting when they'd literally stolen her house. The Martinez family drove 2 hours from their forced relocation, bringing documentation of their own nightmare. 3 other foreclosure victims crawled out of the woodwork once word spread through the veteran community. By meeting night, we had what Sun Tzu would call the moral high ground with documentation to match. But Skylar had other entertainment planned. The second theft happened during my grocery run, broad daylight again, because apparently successful criminals stick with proven strategies. My GPS tracker exploded with alerts, showing my purple 4-track screaming toward downtown Phoenix at speeds that would terrify Formula One drivers. Following the signal led me to a warehouse district party that looked like Burning Man's trashy younger brother. Bass thumped loud enough to wake the dead while the smell of cheap beer and questionable decisions hung in the desert air like a toxic cloud. And there, in the middle of this collegiate disaster zone, was my wife's memory being turned into a carnival ride. Drunk college kids were taking turns riding my 4-tracks through obstacle courses made of beer cans and traffic cones, whooping like they'd discovered fire. But the real gut punch came from Skylar's entrepreneurial spirit. She was charging $50 a head for the privilege of desecrating something sacred. Desert Adventure Rentals. No rules, no limits, her Instagram advertised, complete with Venmo payment instructions and my stolen ATV starring in every promotional photo. I sat in my truck across the street documenting everything while my blood pressure threatened to blow gaskets. Each screenshot felt like evidence for a future prosecution, but watching strangers treat Sarah's final project like a rented carnival ride made my hands shake with rage. The legal implications were beautiful, though. Back during my messy divorce years ago, Jake's attorney had explained how unauthorized commercial use of someone else's property elevates simple theft to felony conversion in Arizona. Skylar hadn't just stolen my ATV, she'd turned it into an unlicensed business operation with documented profits. But my real intelligence breakthrough came from an unexpected source, her customers. Turns out drunk college kids love documenting their poor decisions online. Within hours, I had contacts for a dozen people who'd paid Princess Skylar for rides, complete with time-stamped Venmo receipts and video evidence of their experiences. Several were happy to talk. Apparently, our entitled entrepreneur had been rude to customers who complained about the ATV's deteriorating condition. While I built my digital case file, Delilah escalated to amateur-hour intimidation tactics. The harassment started with 3 a.m. phone calls, heavy breathing followed by dramatic hang-ups like some discount store thriller villain. I recorded everything, naturally. Then came the mysterious black sedan with tinted windows, always parked outside my house at night, but gone by morning. My trail cameras captured everything, including license plates that traced back to a rental company. Poor Mrs. Henderson got the real message. Slashed tires and a brick through her front window. The threat was crystal clear. Cooperate with Tank Wheeler. Face consequences. Here's what these amateur criminals didn't understand about military veterans. We don't abandon soldiers under fire, and we definitely don't intimidate worth a damn. I organized a neighborhood watch program that would make NORAD jealous. Patrol schedules, communication protocols, documentation requirements for every suspicious activity. Within a week, we had surveillance coverage that could spot a jaywalking squirrel. The intimidation stopped immediately. Bullies hate fair fights. My real breakthrough came when Jake's attorney friend reviewed our HOA documents and started laughing like he'd discovered buried treasure. For 3 years, Delilah had been collecting fines without proper board authorization, a violation so basic, it was embarrassing. Arizona law requires majority board approval for individual fines over $50. Every citation she'd issued solo was illegal theft disguised as community management. The evidence was staggering. 47,000 in illegal collections, 23,000 funneled to her company as consultation fees, forged meeting minutes covering her tracks. But Princess Skylar delivered the knockout punch herself, a video showing her removing VIN numbers from my ATV, teaching followers how to make any ride untraceable. Federal crime, mandatory minimums, game over. The hunters had become the hunted. My partnership with Henderson's forensic accountant's son felt like assembling a sniper rifle, every piece clicking into place with deadly precision. Marcus Henderson Jr. had inherited his mother's eagle eyes for detail, plus a CPA's bloodthirsty love for numbers that didn't add up. What we discovered in Delilah's financial records made my morning coffee taste like liquid justice. 3 years of HOA documents spread across my kitchen table like evidence from a federal raid. The smell of fresh ink from my overworked printer mixing with the stale rage I'd been nursing since this whole mess started. Every foreclosure followed the same criminal pattern. Property seized on Monday, mysterious consulting fee of exactly $15,000 hitting Delilah's account by Thursday. The timing was so precise you could set your watch by the corruption. But Marcus Jr.'s real genius move was obtaining Delilah's tax returns through public records requests. The woman who'd been collecting illegal fees like Halloween candy hadn't reported a single dollar to the IRS. We're talking systematic tax evasion that would make organized crime bosses take notes. Total theft estimate, $127,000 hidden in plain sight through paperwork that looked legitimate until you knew what to look for. Meanwhile, Princess Skylar had transformed my wife's memory into a full-scale criminal enterprise that would have impressed Al Capone. Her illegal ATV rental operation now covered 3 regular locations: downtown warehouse parties where trust fund kids paid premium rates for authentic rebel experiences, some mysterious ranch property outside Phoenix, and private desert gatherings that looked like Mad Max auditions gone wrong. My GPS tracker painted a digital portrait of systematic theft turned into unlicensed business venture. The irony was beautiful. She'd stolen something worthless to her and turned it into proof of multiple felonies. Her Instagram documentation read like a prosecutor's Christmas wish list. $75 an hour, no insurance, no business license, no safety equipment, and definitely no permission from the guy who actually owned the damn thing. Customer reviews included gems like best illegal ride ever and worth every penny to feel like a real outlaw. But alcohol and social media proved to be Skylar's perfect storm of stupidity. One particularly damaging video showed her providing additional drinks to obviously intoxicated customers while they rode my ATV through desert terrain that would challenge sober professionals. The smell of cheap beer and bad decisions practically leaked through the screen as she encouraged increasingly dangerous stunts for social media content. Arizona's strict liability laws about providing alcohol to intoxicated persons don't mess around, especially when dangerous equipment enters the equation. Every bottle she handed out was another felony charge waiting to mature. My IRS whistleblower complaint landed like a financial cruise missile with a payload of documentation that could choke a government office. The response was swift and merciless. Full audit notifications for both Morrison family members, asset freezes pending investigation, and criminal referrals that made my original complaint look like a gentle suggestion. Federal agencies don't appreciate tax cheats, especially when the evidence arrives pre-organized with exhibits labeled and cross-referenced. But Delilah's legal counterattack revealed desperation that smelled like fear mixed with expensive attorney fees. The restraining order she filed was creative fiction worthy of awards recognition. According to her sworn testimony, I had threatened violence during hostile communications, engaged in systematic stalking behavior, and created an atmosphere of terror through militant surveillance tactics. Her tearful courthouse performance convinced a judge who probably hadn't seen the mountain of evidence documenting actual crimes. Suddenly, I was legally prohibited from Morrison property, HOA meetings, or any family contact. Should have been game over. Instead, it became the tactical gift that kept giving. Restraining orders create official court records, which triggers discovery processes and subpoena powers. Delilah's strategy to silence me had accidentally given my attorney legal weapons to demand access to all her communications, financial records, and business dealings under court supervision. She'd just handed me the keys to her entire criminal operation. Local media picked up the story like bloodhounds catching a scent. HOA president accused of multi-year theft scheme hit evening news with footage of my damaged ATV and interviews with foreclosure victims whose stories would make grown men weep. The reporter had connected every criminal dot: illegal fines, suspicious foreclosures, Delilah's real estate profits, and the systematic targeting of veterans and working families. Social media exploded with hashtag Willowbrook scandal trending across Phoenix, comment sections becoming digital support groups for HOA abuse survivors. But Princess Skylar's media response proved that terminal stupidity was hereditary. Instead of disappearing while federal investigations circled her family like vultures, she launched a social media offensive that would have made crisis management professionals retire in shame. Her posts became increasingly unhinged. "Haters gonna hate while I keep winning," accompanied by videos of her joyriding my stolen ATV through locations that GPS coordinates could pinpoint for prosecutors. The final nail in her criminal coffin came when she attempted selling rides to news reporters covering the story. The sheer audacity was breathtaking, actively committing federal crimes while cameras rolled, apparently believing family connections made physics and federal law optional. But my real breakthrough came from insurance fraud investigators who'd been tracking suspicious ATV theft patterns across Arizona. My case was the missing puzzle piece they needed to expose something much bigger than neighborhood corruption. The small-time criminals were about to discover they'd accidentally joined a federal case. The manila envelope that destroyed the Morrison empire arrived on a Tuesday morning that tasted like impending thunderstorms and long overdue justice. Jake had received court-ordered discovery documents, and the smell of fresh legal paper mixed with my morning coffee as we spread financial records across my kitchen table like generals planning an invasion. What we found made my hands shake, not from nerves but from pure adrenaline. Hidden bank statements revealed something that made neighborhood HOA corruption look like shoplifting candy. The Morrison family ranch, that mysterious property where Skylar had been running her illegal rental operation, was purchased with stolen HOA money through a fraud scheme so elaborate it belonged in criminal law textbooks. $240,000 in community maintenance equipment storage that turned out to be luxury vacation property complete with pool, guest houses, and horse stables that probably cost more than most people's homes. The invoices were masterpieces of creative accounting. Industrial equipment shelter for a pool house that looked like it belonged in Architectural Digest. My stolen ATV wasn't just being used for crime, it was operating from a crime scene purchased with money stolen from the very neighbors being terrorized. But the real earthquake hit 3 days later with Jake's 6 a.m. phone call. "Tank, you sitting down because what I'm about to tell you is going to knock you on your ass." The FBI Financial Crimes Unit had been investigating the Morrison family for 8 months. My complaint hadn't started their investigation, it had provided the final puzzle pieces they needed to complete a federal case that would make headlines from Phoenix to Washington. The raid was scheduled for 72 hours. Turns out my neighborhood nightmare was actually the tip of an iceberg that could sink the Titanic. The Morrison family was running identical HOA theft operations across Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico, hundreds of planned communities, thousands of families, over $3 million in systematic theft disguised as community management. They weren't just petty neighborhood tyrants, they were organized criminals running a multi-state operation that would make the mob jealous. The political corruption web was equally staggering. Bradley Morrison's city council seat was one tentacle of an operation that included county assessors, planning commissioners, and municipal judges who made problems evaporate for the right contributions. Building permits, rubber-stamped environmental studies buried, zoning violations that disappeared like morning mist. City contracts worth millions had been awarded to shell companies that funneled money back to the Morrison network through the same consulting fee structure they'd used to rob homeowners. My property tax payments had probably helped fund the very corruption that was stealing my neighbors' homes. The beautiful irony hit me like a lightning bolt. I'd gone from victim to federal witness whose evidence helped expose organized crime. The power dynamic hadn't just shifted, it had completely inverted. Federal prosecutor offered me immunity plus whistleblower compensation up to 30% of recovered funds. With $3 million on the table, we were looking at life-changing money. But more importantly, justice wasn't just possible anymore. It was guaranteed with federal resources backing it. Delilah's desperate escape attempt made evening news when federal agents intercepted her private jet at Phoenix Sky Harbor. The woman who'd terrorized entire neighborhoods with paperwork and fake fines was learning what real handcuffs felt like. Her tearful courthouse performance about being a simple community volunteer fell flat when prosecutors presented evidence of systematic criminal enterprise. Princess Skylar's world collapsed in real time as federal agents seized everything. BMW gone, rental operations shuttered, social media accounts became prosecution exhibits. The entitled brat who'd thought family connections made consequences optional was staring at federal charges with maximum sentences exceeding 20 years. My choice was simple. Take the money and disappear, or stay and ensure every victim got justice. I chose justice. The underdog wasn't just holding cards anymore. I was playing with a federal deck that could reshape the entire game board. Sarah would have been proud. Time to finish what they started. The transformation of my garage from restoration shop to Federal Evidence Command Center happened faster than a military deployment. Within 24 hours of the FBI revelation, my workspace smelled like determination mixed with the metallic tang of justice about to be served. I recruited my team like assembling a special operations unit, each member bringing skills that would make the Morrison family wish they'd never heard of Willowbrook Estates. Martinez joined as my financial analyst. His CPA training, combined with personal rage over losing his family home, created a motivation that could power small cities. Henderson's forensic accountant's son brought federal-level evidence organization skills that would make FBI agents weep with professional jealousy. Jake provided legal coordination, and Detective Rodriguez, now fully committed after seeing the federal evidence, became our law enforcement liaison. My kitchen table became mission control, covered with whiteboards showing criminal timelines that looked like military battle plans. Digital evidence lived on multiple encrypted drives, backed up more securely than Fort Knox gold reserves. Physical evidence was cataloged using inventory procedures I'd learned tracking military equipment in hostile territories. The legal strategy, Jake explained, made beautiful sense once you understood the federal playbook. RICO charges treat criminal organizations like terrorist cells. Once you prove the enterprise exists, every member becomes liable for every crime committed by the group. Asset forfeiture laws meant the government could seize everything purchased with stolen money, from luxury ranch properties to Princess Skylar's BMW. But here's the knowledge I'd picked up during my Army legal training. Federal whistleblower protections are bulletproof when you follow proper procedures, document everything, report through official channels, and cooperate fully with investigations. Do it right, and the government becomes your personal bodyguard against retaliation. The financial recovery mechanisms were equally impressive. Arizona law requires HOA board members to carry insurance against theft, something I'd learned during my late-night research sessions. The Morrison family's $2 million liability policy meant recovery funds were guaranteed even if they'd spent every stolen dollar. Community mobilization felt like organizing a resistance movement behind enemy lines. Weekly strategy meetings at the community center drew growing crowds as neighbors shared stories that would make hardened prosecutors demand maximum sentences. I created simple fact sheets explaining homeowner rights in language that didn't require law degrees to understand. The phone tree we established could coordinate witness testimony faster than emergency response systems. Every affected family received documentation templates and evidence preservation guidelines that would make their testimonies prosecution ready. But my real stroke of genius was the media strategy that turned local corruption into national outrage. Working with that investigative journalist required careful evidence sharing enough access to tell the story without compromising federal prosecution. The reporter's research uncovered connections between Morrison family crimes and similar HOA abuse patterns across multiple states, turning our neighborhood nightmare into a symbol of systemic corruption that resonated with audiences nationwide. Public pressure forced government action faster than political contributions could slow it down. When #Willowbrook scandal started trending on social media, politicians began distancing themselves from the Morrison family like they carried plague. The technical evidence preparation showcased 20 years of military precision applied to civilian justice. GPS tracking data became courtroom-ready maps showing exact routes and timestamps for every theft. Social media posts were archived with chain-of-custody documentation that would survive federal appeals court scrutiny. Financial records were organized into before and after comparisons that even financially illiterate jurors could understand. The visual impact was devastating. Thriving community transformed into criminal exploitation zone through systematic theft disguised as legitimate governance. Legal filing coordination required simultaneous complaints to multiple agencies: FBI, IRS, State Attorney General, County Prosecutor, each receiving customized evidence packages tailored to their specific jurisdiction and authority. The strategy prevented any single corrupt official from burying the case while ensuring maximum pressure from every possible angle. Community education became my personal mission. The HOA rights workshops I developed taught neighbors how to read bylaws like constitutional lawyers, challenge illegal fines like civil rights activists, and demand financial transparency like investigative journalists. Knowledge sharing prevented future abuse while empowering people who'd felt helpless against institutional corruption. The federal cooperation protocols I learned could fill textbooks. Proper evidence handling, witness coordination meetings, victim impact statement preparation, everything designed to ensure maximum prosecution success while protecting everyone who'd been brave enough to stand up against criminals with political connections. Restitution calculations required forensic accounting that traced every stolen dollar through multiple bank accounts and shell companies. The paper trail showed specific victims and exact amounts owed, plus interest and damages that would make the final settlement numbers truly meaningful for families who'd lost everything. But the most satisfying preparation was psychological. Watching the Morrison family's confidence crumble as they realized their political connections meant nothing against federal prosecution backed by overwhelming evidence. The master timeline we created covered 4 years of escalating criminal activity, showing decision points where intervention could have stopped the scheme. It became the prosecution's primary weapon and the defense's worst nightmare. As federal agents prepared for coordinated raids across 3 states, I sat in my garage command center surrounded by evidence that would reshape multiple communities and send criminals to prison for decades. The planning phase was complete. Time for execution. Justice was about to be served with military precision and federal authority backing every move. The Morrison family had no idea what was coming. Delilah's desperate final gambit began at midnight on Thursday with the smell of fear and gasoline hanging in the desert air. Security cameras at the HOA office captured her breaking in like a common burglar, frantically trying to destroy 4 years of evidence that could send her family to federal prison for decades. The footage was beautiful in its criminal stupidity. Queen Bee reduced to petty breaking and entering, trying to delete computer files and burn paper documents in a metal trash can like some kind of suburban arsonist. But here's what panic makes people forget. Digital files have backups, and financial crimes leave paper trails in multiple locations. My hidden cameras in the HOA office, legally installed after the new board voted me emergency powers, captured everything in crystal clear 4K resolution. But the real gift came when those same cameras caught Delilah attempting to plant drugs in my personal file, apparently believing she could frame me to discredit my federal testimony. Evidence tampering, breaking and entering, attempted drug planting. The additional charges were piling up like Christmas presents for prosecutors, but Princess Skylar's social media meltdown provided entertainment that money couldn't buy. Her Instagram stories became increasingly unhinged as federal heat intensified. Videos of her making explicit threats against me and my neighbors, waving weapons around like some kind of trust fund gangster, and promising consequences for anyone who dared cross her family. Each post was screenshot and forwarded to federal agents faster than she could spell witness intimidation. The irony was delicious. She was literally creating evidence of federal crimes while trying to intimidate the people whose testimony would destroy her. Bradley Morrison's political corruption finally made headline news when investigative reporters uncovered the full scope of his city council shenanigans. Email trails revealed quid pro quo arrangements with local contractors that would make Chicago politicians take notes. Voting records showed systematic favoritism toward Morrison family properties, environmental impact studies buried deeper than Jimmy Hoffa, and building permits fast-tracked through bureaucracy like VIP treatment at exclusive nightclubs. Federal corruption charges against a sitting council member created political earthquakes that registered on every news station from Phoenix to Washington. The smell of political careers burning filled City Hall like smoke from a dumpster fire. The bribery attempt came through an intermediary who apparently thought federal witnesses could be bought like city council votes. $50,000 cash to drop the matter and relocate somewhere peaceful, delivered by a nervous lawyer who sweated through his expensive suit like he was melting. But federal agents had prepared me for exactly this scenario, complete with recording equipment that captured every word of attempted witness tampering. The wire I wore during that meeting felt like wearing justice under my shirt. Every word of their desperate offer was preserved for prosecutors who collect witness intimidation charges like trophies. But the community intimidation campaign revealed just how desperate and stupid criminals become when walls start closing in. Threatening phone calls to elderly Mrs. Henderson escalated to property damage/tires, broken windows, and vandalism that would have made teenage delinquents ashamed of such amateur work. Fellow veterans in our coalition reported similar harassment, suspicious vehicles parked outside homes, threatening letters in mailboxes, and the kind of psychological warfare that backfires spectacularly when used against people trained to handle actual combat. My security enhancement response was swift and comprehensive. Professional-grade surveillance systems throughout my property, neighborhood mutual protection networks that operated like military patrols, and documentation protocols that recorded every intimidation attempt with evidence quality that would make FBI agents proud. The smear campaign they launched against me was so pathetically desperate, it became comedy gold. Private investigators digging through my military service records, financial history, and personal life, looking for dirt that doesn't exist when you've lived an honest life dedicated to service and family. Fake social media accounts spreading lies about my character and motives created digital evidence trails that federal cybercrimes units traced back to Morrison family IP addresses faster than you could say criminal conspiracy. Local gossip mills activated with whisper campaigns about my real reasons for targeting their family. Apparently standing up to criminals makes you suspicious in their twisted worldview. But my reputation defense was rock solid because truth is bulletproof against lies. Military records showed distinguished service and honorable discharge. Financial transparency opened my books to federal investigators, proving decades of honest work and clean living. Character witnesses lined up like volunteers for a just cause. Fellow veterans, satisfied customers, neighbors who'd watched me raise Devon with integrity and dedication. The legal system manipulation they attempted was equally pathetic, frivolous motions designed to delay federal proceedings, bogus claims of prosecutorial misconduct, and counter-lawsuits that would have been laughable if they weren't so transparently desperate. Their strategy was obvious: overwhelm the system with paperwork and run out the clock before federal prosecution could proceed. But federal courts don't operate like local traffic court, and judges who handle organized crime cases have seen every delay tactic ever invented. My federal witness preparation intensified as prosecution date approached. FBI agents taught testimony techniques that would survive aggressive cross-examination, evidence presentation methods that made complex financial crimes understandable to average jurors, and confidence-building exercises that prepared me for the courtroom battle that would decide everything. The insurance fraud investigation that had started with my stolen ATV expanded into multi-state organized crime prosecution. What began as neighborhood harassment had become federal case study in systematic criminal enterprise. The hunters had become the hunted, and they were about to discover that federal justice doesn't negotiate with criminals. The federal raids executed with military precision that would have made my old commanding officers weep with pride. At exactly 6 a.m. on a crisp October morning, FBI agents hit Morrison properties simultaneously across 3 states while the smell of coffee and justice filled the desert air. My phone buzzed with updates as I watched from my kitchen window. Black SUVs surrounding the Morrison house like wolves circling wounded prey. Agents in tactical gear carrying boxes of evidence that represented 4 years of systematic criminal enterprise, and news helicopters circling overhead like vultures drawn to corruption's carcass. The technical support I provided felt like the best military operation I'd ever participated in. GPS coordinates for hidden assets, safe locations based on my surveillance work, and detailed property layouts that helped agents navigate the criminal maze the Morrison family had built around their stolen wealth. Community members gathered on street corners watching justice finally arrive with federal authority backing every move. Mrs. Henderson stood on her porch with tears of vindication streaming down her weathered cheeks, while the Martinez family drove from their forced relocation to witness the criminals who'd stolen their home getting perp-walked in handcuffs. Princess Schuyler's arrest at her college party was broadcast live on every news channel in Phoenix. Federal agents interrupting her alcohol-fueled celebration of criminal immunity, cuffing her in front of drunk friends who thought family connections made consequences optional, and charging her with grand theft, money laundering, and organized crime conspiracy that carried maximum sentences exceeding 15 years. The look of entitled shock on her face when reality hit was worth every sleepless night I'd spent building the case against her family. My stolen ATV was recovered from the Morrison Ranch in condition that made my chest tighten with rage and vindication. Total loss confirmed by insurance investigators, but the GPS tracking data it had generated became prosecution gold that would send criminals to federal prison for decades. Delilah's federal courthouse breakdown provided courtroom drama that rivaled Hollywood productions. Attempts to blame everything on her husband Bradley, claims of domestic abuse and financial coercion, and tearful performances that fell flat when prosecutors presented evidence proving her leadership role in systematic theft operations. The woman who'd terrorized entire neighborhoods with illegal fines and fraudulent foreclosures was learning what real consequences felt like when federal prosecutors don't care about local political connections. Bradley Morrison's resignation in disgrace made front-page news across Arizona. City council members stepping down under federal indictment, political career destroyed, pension benefits forfeited, and corruption network collapsing without the municipal influence that had protected criminal operations for years. Local political machines built on corruption don't survive federal prosecution, and watching decades of illegal influence crumble felt like witnessing justice delivered with compound interest. My victim impact testimony to federal court was the most important speech I'd ever delivered. 3 hours of detailed evidence presentation, describing personal loss when Sarah's memory was desecrated by entitled criminals, explaining community damage when working families lost homes to systematic theft, and demonstrating how organized crime disguised as neighborhood governance had destroyed trust and security for hundreds of families. The judge's visible reaction to my military bearing and clear moral stance told me everything about how this case would end. Federal courts take systematic corruption seriously, especially when victims include veterans and elderly citizens targeted by criminals with political protection. Community healing began immediately after the arrests. HOA reformed under court-appointed administrator who implemented transparency measures that would prevent future abuse, illegal fines reversed with interest payments that provided real compensation, and foreclosure victims receiving both property restoration and punitive damages that acknowledged years of suffering. My unanimous election as interim HOA president felt like democracy restored after liberation from criminal occupation. First official act: eliminate punitive enforcement policies and focus on genuine community improvement that benefits residents instead of enriching criminals. The restitution announcement from federal court exceeded everyone's expectations. $2.3 million in victim compensation, my whistleblower reward of $127,000, and individual family settlements averaging $35,000 that would help rebuild lives destroyed by systematic theft. Illegal foreclosure victims got their homes back, plus damages that acknowledged the trauma of losing everything to criminals operating under government protection. Skylar's plea bargain rejection revealed the terminal entitlement that had started this whole nightmare. Prosecutors offered 5 years for cooperation against her parents, but Princess Entitled refused to accept responsibility despite video evidence showing systematic criminal behavior documented through her own social media stupidity. Trial scheduled with maximum sentences now exceeding 15 years due to organized crime charges that don't negotiate with wealthy defendants who think family connections make federal law optional. Morrison family asset liquidation provided satisfying closure as luxury possessions purchased with stolen money were auctioned to fund victim compensation. Ranch selling for exactly the amount stolen from HOA accounts, vehicles, and jewelry converted to cash for families who'd lost everything, and criminal empire reduced to federal evidence exhibits. The media circus surrounding the trial transformed our neighborhood corruption story into national symbol of citizen courage against institutional abuse. Interview requests from major networks, speaking invitations from HOA reform organizations, and social media following that spread the message of ordinary people fighting back against extraordinary corruption. But my focus remained local, ensuring every victim received justice and every criminal faced maximum consequences for systematic abuse of power disguised as community service. The war was nearly over, but the final battle would determine whether justice was just theoretical concept or practical reality for working families targeted by organized crime. Federal prosecution was about to deliver the verdict that would define everything. The federal courthouse on sentencing day buzzed with an energy that felt like electricity before a thunderstorm. Standing room only courtroom packed with over 200 community supporters, the smell of nervous anticipation mixing with the polished wood scent of impending justice, and media coverage from 5 news stations broadcasting the climax of our 3-year battle against organized crime disguised as neighborhood governance. I entered wearing my dress military uniform, ribbons, and decorations that represented 20 years of honorable service, creating a visual contrast against 3 defendants in orange federal jumpsuits who'd learned that wealth couldn't buy freedom from consequences. The prosecution's evidence presentation was devastating in its thoroughness. GPS tracking data displayed on courtroom screens showing exact routes and timestamps for every theft, financial records proving systematic money laundering through fake consulting fees, and social media posts documenting criminal behavior with the kind of self-incriminating stupidity that makes prosecutors celebrate. My 3 hours of testimony felt like delivering a military briefing on criminal operations. Details about evidence collection, financial damage analysis, and community impact assessment delivered with precision that impressed the jury and left defense attorneys scrambling for credible responses to overwhelming documentation. Cross-examination attempts to shake my story failed spectacularly. Defense lawyers trying to portray me as vindictive veteran with personal vendetta against successful family, but military bearing and factual accuracy made their character assassination attempts look desperate and pathetic. The turning point came when Skylar's entitled attitude exploded in open court. During my testimony about the ATV theft's emotional impact, she interrupted with a profanity-laced tirade that revealed the criminal mindset that had started this entire nightmare. "He's lying. We're rich. You can't do this to us. My family owns half this city." Judge ordered immediate removal while additional contempt charges were filed. But the damage was done. Jury witnessed firsthand the entitled arrogance that had terrorized an entire community, confirming prosecution arguments about systematic abuse of power and criminal disregard for law and consequences. The smoking gun evidence that sealed their fate was Skylar's own video documentation of removing VIN numbers from my ATV while explaining to social media followers how to make any ride untraceable for maximum adventure freedom. Federal crimes committed on camera with step-by-step criminal instructions that would make FBI training videos jealous. Defense case collapsed under the weight of self-documenting criminal behavior that no amount of expensive legal representation could explain away or justify. Community impact statements provided emotional devastation that complemented legal evidence with human consequences. Elderly Mrs. Henderson describing 40 years of memories lost when criminals stole her home through fraudulent fines, Martinez family explaining children's trauma from sudden eviction caused by systematic theft, and victim after victim detailing lives destroyed by organized crime operating under government protection. Judges' visible reaction to testimony about working families targeted by criminals with political connections showed federal courts take systematic oppression seriously, especially when victims include veterans and elderly citizens who'd believed in community governance until criminals betrayed that trust. Delilah's failed defense strategy of claiming mental illness and medication-induced poor judgment contradicted years of systematic planning, documented through evidence that proved calculated criminal enterprise operating across multiple states with sophisticated money laundering and political corruption components. Psychiatric testimony backfired when prosecution experts demonstrated that complex financial crimes require sustained mental capacity and deliberate planning that contradicts claims of impaired judgment or diminished responsibility. Bradley Morrison's last-minute cooperation attempt offering testimony against family members in exchange for reduced sentences was rejected by prosecutors who'd built cases so strong that criminal deals were unnecessary. Evidence spoke louder than cooperation, and justice demanded maximum consequences for systematic abuse of public trust. The verdict announcement after only 3 hours of jury deliberation confirmed what community had known for years. Guilty on all counts, including RICO conspiracy, money laundering, theft, fraud, and organized crime charges that carried sentences measured in decades rather than years. Courtroom erupted in applause that judge allowed to continue as emotional release for community that had endured years of systematic oppression before finding courage to fight back against criminals with political protection. Sentencing phase delivered justice that exceeded expectations. Schuyler received 12 years federal prison plus 5 years supervised release. Delilah got 15 years plus lifetime ban from HOA service, and Bradley received 8 years plus forfeiture of all pension benefits earned through public corruption. My victim impact statement addressed the Morrison family directly with words that felt like final military mission briefing. You thought political connections made you untouchable, but this is America where justice belongs to everyone, not just wealthy criminals. My wife Sarah would be proud that we fought for what's right instead of accepting what's easy. The courtroom statement went viral within hours, 2 million views of ordinary citizens standing up to institutional corruption, becoming symbol of courage against systematic abuse that resonated with audiences nationwide who'd faced similar battles against criminals with government protection. Federal asset forfeiture completion transferred all Morrison property to Victim Compensation Fund, ensuring maximum recovery for families who'd lost everything to systematic theft disguised as legitimate governance. Justice had been served with interest, penalties, and federal authority that made consequences permanent and meaningful. The war was over, and the good guys had won decisively. 6 months after the final gavel fell, the sweet smell of victory mixed with motor oil filled my garage as Devin and I put finishing touches on our rebuilt purple ATV. Every bolt we tightened felt like healing. Every polished surface reflected Sarah's memory restored to its rightful glory, and the sound of our tools working in harmony created the soundtrack of justice delivered with compound interest. The transformation of Willowbrook Estates was nothing short of miraculous. Our HOA became the poster child for transparency. Nationwide monthly financial reports posted online where even Mrs. Henderson could understand every penny. Board meetings live streamed to prevent backroom criminal dealings, and community decisions made through actual democracy instead of felony intimidation tactics. Property values jumped 20% thanks to honest management and the kind of national recognition you can't buy with stolen money. The community garden we established on former Morrison Ranch land bloomed with Sarah's favorite purple wildflowers, turning criminal real estate into living memorial that made the desert beautiful again. My leadership style proved that collaboration beats corruption every single time. Residents actually had voices in decisions affecting their lives. Expenditures required transparent justification that wouldn't embarrass a saint. And every policy served community benefit instead of enriching criminal families with political protection. The Sarah Wheeler Memorial Scholarship Fund launched with my whistleblower reward plus donations that proved good people outnumber criminals when given the chance to choose sides. $10,000 annually for military families pursuing education, with Martinez's daughter as our first recipient studying criminal justice to prevent the systematic abuse that had nearly destroyed her childhood. Each spring scholarship ceremony brought together families whose lives proved that ordinary courage could overcome extraordinary corruption when backed by federal prosecution and community solidarity. Arizona's legal landscape changed permanently through the Tank Wheeler Act unanimous legislative passage requiring HOA transparency, elected oversight, and homeowner protections that would make future Morrison families think twice before turning neighborhood governance into criminal enterprises. My testimony before lawmakers about citizen power against institutional corruption inspired investigations across 12 states, creating ripple effects that protected millions of families from HOA abuse disguised as legitimate community management. The Veterans Administration speaking circuit taught me that military skills translate perfectly to civilian justice battles. Leadership, intelligence gathering, evidence preservation, coalition building, all the tools needed to fight criminals who thought political connections made consequences optional. Morrison family aftermath provided closure sweeter than Sarah's favorite chocolate cake. All three serving federal time in different facilities, criminal empire dismantled like a house of cards in a hurricane, and their names erased from local memory like they'd never contaminated our community with their presence. Princess Schuyler's digital footprint vanished completely. Social media accounts deleted, entitled Attitude Adjusted by Federal Reality, and Instagram influence reduced to prison commissary negotiations. My homeowner defense network expanded nationwide, operating from my garage-turned-community resource center where the smell of fresh coffee mixed with legal victory. 23 family disputes resolved in year one, dozens of illegal foreclosures prevented through education and early intervention, and proof that one person's courage could inspire movements that protected entire communities. Annual Freedom Festival celebrations turned our victory into community tradition, featuring food trucks that actually tasted good, veteran recognition ceremonies that honored real service, and scholarship fundraising that brought neighbors together in ways criminal divisiveness never could have imagined. Devin and I led every parade on our restored ATV, purple paint gleaming under Arizona sunshine, while we rode through streets where democracy had been restored through determination and federal prosecution that proved justice was more than theoretical concept. His pre-law studies at Arizona State fulfilled dreams Sarah and I had shared about raising children with moral compasses that pointed towards service instead of self-interest. Public interest law career plans inspired by watching ordinary citizens defeat institutional corruption through truth, evidence, and refusal to accept criminal governance as normal neighborhood experience. Elena Rodriguez brought healing that honored past love while building future hope. Two veterans finding that justice and personal happiness could coexist when built on solid foundations of shared values and mutual respect for service above self. But the most satisfying outcome was elegantly simple. Evil hadn't won because good people refused to do nothing, and systematic corruption had been replaced with transparent democracy that served community instead of enriching criminals with political protection. The fight continues every day, but now we know victory is possible. Drop a comment sharing your HOA nightmare story. You're not alone in this fight. And the Karen Stories community is here to support each other against corruption. Hit that subscribe button if you believe ordinary people can overcome extraordinary criminals through courage, documentation, and refusal to accept injustice as normal neighborhood governance. Remember the Tank Wheeler lesson. Stand up, speak out, document everything. Justice is possible when good people work together against institutional abuse. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and keep fighting the good fight.